In terms of retirement, how important is it that you own your house?
We have a lot of clients who, for their entire working career, they owned a home, they retired, and they decided, hey, I want to go be in Florida. I want to go be in Arizona. And they sell their house and they decide, hey, I'm just going to rent in different markets and that works totally fine. So I'd argue for them, the necessity of home ownership doesn't exist at all. They have a very small footprint. They're able to kind of bounce around. That's totally okay. People can do it and be successful. And other people love having a home base. Hey, I'm going to buy my house. I'm going to have it paid off. I'm going to live here. This is where I'm going to age into a ripe old age. There's not a right or wrong answer. Personal finance is so personal. It depends on the unique thing that you're trying to accomplish.
I do like people to be debt-free in retirement, but it's not a necessity. The thing I always try to remind people, we have this concept, we talk about the wealth multiplier. That's why I get heartbroken when I find out a 32-year-old is paying down their mortgage that's 4% instead of funding their Roth IRA because they're debt crusading. Versus, I don't get mad when I find out like a 58-year-old is paying down a 2.5% mortgage. It's because
Assuming they have assets.
Assuming they have assets is because they might be deciding that the arbitrage or the delta on what they're making is just not worth it. The squeeze of the fruit or the risk is not worth it when what they're trying to do overall. So I like de-risking because I kind of alluded to this earlier. When you retire, meaning you're living off the money you've now saved or a pension or whatever, it stresses you out when you see all this geopolitical or economic stuff because, a lot of us, I think we have this cope that we do is when the market goes down, we're like, it's okay. I'll just put down my nose. I'll work harder. Or maybe I'll even save a little bit more to hedge against it. When you leave the workforce and you go into full retirement, you don't get that comfort. Now you have to say, holy cow, I'm not only living off these assets, but I'm watching the volatility decay, what took me decades to build. So it just hits different. So if you can do other things in your life, like take out debt and other things that create obligations or things that you have to do, it's a truer version of freedom in retirement.
Is $1 million enough to retire in 2026?
Can you live off of $40,000 a year?
How old are you?
60 years old.
Okay, 60 years old. What that means is Social Security is likely going to come your way. 60-year-old with a portfolio, if you assume somewhere between a 4 to 5% annual withdrawal rate, you're going to be able to pull $40,000 to $50,000 off of that, assuming you never bit into the principal. But in reality, in retirement, you can get into the principal.
Did you say put Social Security on it too?
So then I was going to say, once you have that $40,000 to $50,000, then you put Social Security on top of that, which for a lot of folks is another 30, 40 grand.
4 or 5 grand a month, yeah, maybe.
What if you're 40 years old?
No.
Will $1 million be enough when you
to retire?
I'm going to say retire. No. You want to retire.
He's going to answer my financial planner. I'm going to say, you want to tell you why I say no? It's because and I'm not going to call them out by names, but there have been other fire movement people who've retired super early, like 35, 40, and then they've come back and they're really good people and they've done great content. But if you're being honest, once they start having kids and they're like, holy cow, these kids are a lot more expensive than I ever thought. And they usually have to go figure out, because it's just they didn't have enough life figured out to truly call yourself retired at 40 years of age, because a lot of life is still going to happen to you. I think a lot of times in retirement, the die needs to be set to a degree so you kind of really can measure out what your expenses are going to be in the future. If you're doing this at 35 or 40 years old and you don't, like for you, Jack, you're not married, right? Don't have kids. Do you know how much life is going to change for you? If you tried to say right now, I'm done, I've got enough, I just don't know that you have enough of your life tied down.
What is the realistic retirement amount for someone who wants to have a family of 4?
I want to make sure I understand your question. Are you asking, can a 40-year-old with $1 million retire today, or can a 40-year-old today get to $1 million by retirement?
No, can a 40-year-old with $1 million today retire?
Yeah, I think that'd be hard.
And so what is the realistic amount?
Because health insurance too.
What is the realistic amount that someone who is 40 years old needs to retire to support a family of 4?
It depends on their living expense. I know it's a really hard answer to give, but it depends on living expenses. Some families of 4 can live off of $3,000, $4,000 a month. Some families of 4, it requires $9,000, $10,000 to live. Well, the retirement portfolio necessary to satisfy both of those enterprises, very, very different. So it's hard to give a hard and fast number.
I wouldn't even sniff around it unless I had $3 to $5 million.
At the age of 40.
Yeah, 40.
Yeah.
What would you say FU money is?
10 million.
Yeah. We talked to I think we kind of covered it, because I think 10 million is a good number because your money earns what is a great life, even if you took very little risk.
What if the market underperforms, like Vanguard says?
With 10 million or in general?
That's the beauty of the 10
million.
million is because it's so, even if you use the safe withdrawal, I mean, if you use the, risk-free rate of return of like of treasuries, I mean, it's still $400,000. I mean, you're talking about $400,000 or $500,000 depending upon
hard to spend
what money.
$30,000 a month.
What do you think is the ideal safe withdrawal rate?
What age?
What age?
40.
I mean, 3.5%.
3.5.
What is the
And
amount?
I wouldn't retire with that. I would want to do I'm running Monte Carlo simulation.
So you know what's
and stress
interesting?
it.
I've done so many calculations on this, and it determined that if you want to retire at the age of, I can't remember if I put 36 or 40, it was one of those, and you live to the age of 95, assuming that average lifespans are going up. It told me that to be able to account for the Great Depression, so basically you're retiring the day before everything collapses.
Right. Sure.
It said 2.75 to, I believe it was 3.2 at the very most, a variance between that. And it said you could actually do a little more if you had a year of expenses in addition to that saved in cash.
Yeah, well, see, but I think with 3.5, you're still young enough and able-bodied. You can go subsidize it if you really got squeezed.
And I want to be, this is something important for the audience to hear. In our mind, safe withdrawal rates are napkin math, right? So like what we're doing
It's not
is
a real
we're talking
financial
about
plan.
I would never tell someone, oh, based on a 3.5% draw rate in this pot of money, you can retire. What I'd want to do is say, okay, you want to retire at age 36. How much are you going to spend from 36 to 50? What are you going to spend from 50 to 65? What are your, like, I'd want to actually not just factor in an estimate of the things you think that will happen between 36 and 95, but realistically put some teeth to it. Okay, you have daughters, great. Are you going to pay for their wedding? How much do you think a wedding is going to cost in today's dollars? What do you project that wedding's going to? How often do you replace automobiles? Do you replace them every 7 years? What kind of automobile? Okay, you want to travel. How often do you want to travel? Do you think you'll be traveling when you're 93? And we would try to, and this is what we do for our clients, get as granular as possible on the things that we can realistically estimate. And then we would reverse engineer using Monte Carlo analysis. Does this get there? Because what actually ends up happening is it's not a static 3.5% safe withdrawal rate every year. There may be a season where the safe withdrawal rate's 9.5%, 10%, but then something changes, spending changes, lifestyle changes, another income source enters, and then the safe withdrawal rate drops down to 2% or something like that. So it's way more dynamic in practice than it is in like academic theory around safe withdrawal rates.
How common is it that people run out of money in retirement versus save too much?
But it's always, that's the save too much. Because I think I'm now at the stage with money that you try to figure out, you look back over your life and go, which were the dollars that actually turned into this dollar and which decision was it? And it was the culmination of all the good decisions together that I don't have regret that without a doubt, I'm not going to leave this planet broke based upon all the good stuff, but I don't have regrets or feel like I left something on the table. I know that's not really answering the question, but I'm trying to get to the mindset that I think you have to be careful because so few Americans actually save what they need to for retirement, even though we showed you with our wealth multiplier, it would take very little, just a little bit of discipline when you're younger to do it. That people aren't even, like 60-year-olds don't have, what was it, 100, and when we did the book tour, it was like $110,000 was the average, investments for somebody in their 60s. That's way below what they should be. So since we have a problem that nobody has the money, I don't want to say there's, the risk is you're going to have too much. That's just you're a rounding error statistically. That's probably not the message I'd want to put out.
And then on the flip side of your question, are there a lot of people that would run out of money in retirement? What often ends up happening is most people aren't like living life, everything goes to zero. What ends up happening is it kind of goes down and they begin having to make sacrifices they might not want to make. Hey, I had a house, but we can't afford this house anymore, so we got to sell it. Hey, I was living on my own, but I can't afford the bill, so I'm going to have to move in with family. And if it gets really dire, it'll devolve in a situation where, hey, I don't really have any assets, but I've got Social Security. I'm going to figure out how can I live on whatever my Social Security check is. I think that's more the reality, because I think the number was something like 60% of retired Americans right now, the majority of their retirement income is Social Security.
Yeah.
Some
crazy
number around there,
like that.
which is sort of a wild thing to think about. So how often do people have to make concessions in retirement they didn't want to make? I think that probably happens more often for the average American than we realize, because I think the average American is not preparing for retirement the way they ought to.
Now, really quick, every business is asking themselves the same question. How do we make AI work for us? The possibilities are limitless, but guessing is too risky, and sitting on the sidelines is not an option because one thing is certain. If you're not doing it, your competitors are already making their move.
And that's where our sponsor NetSuite by Oracle comes in. It's the #1 AI cloud ERP, trusted by over 43,000 businesses to manage everything from financials and inventory to commerce, HR, and CRM, all in one unified system.
When all of your data is in one place, your AI becomes a lot smarter. It doesn't just guess. It knows. NetSuite intelligently automates routine tasks, delivers real-time insights, and helps you make fast, confident decisions that actually help drive growth.
And it's not just an add-on, it's AI that's literally built right into the system that runs your business, helping you cut costs, improve accuracy, and stay ahead of the competition.
Whether your company is making millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite gives you visibility and control to keep moving forward. Honestly, if I were building a business of this size, NetSuite's the only company that I have 100% confidence in.
So if your revenues are at least in the 7 figures, get our completely free business guide, Demystifying AI, at netsuite.com/clips.
Again, the guide is free for you at netsuite.com/clips, netsuite.com/clips, with the link down below in the description.